What's your name?
How are you?
But he's going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Look at the picture.
It's on all the websites.
Wait, it has a little...
Okay, ready? Did we get it?
I am losing my voice, which will be good because I have to MC the show tonight, so that'll be fun. I want to remind everyone the registration table closes at 5:30 today, so if you haven't bought your banquet tickets yet, please get over there before 5:30 to purchase the tickets. The show tonight is going to be great. It starts at 7 o'clock. We're going to have Johnny Meeks up here doing some Gene Vincent songs, and some of Marshall Tucker's band is going to be here. And then, of course, the Frankie Ford Show. And a very big surprise will happen also tonight. So please don't miss that. Plus a great buffet, which I think starts at 6 o'clock. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, the registration table is open until 5:30, so please get those tickets. Okay, so we're going to start this panel. Let me look and make sure everyone is around here, and I believe they are. We're going to start with the first gentleman. This gentleman I've been with the last few days at the airport and restaurants, and he keeps getting recognized every place we go. People will walk up to him and say, "I know you." And every place we go, he gets recognized. You'll know him from Pearl Harbor. He was nominated for Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, The Sand Pebbles. Please welcome MAKO. Right there. Okay. And the next celebrity, let me make sure she is around here. There she is. A lot of people, I mean, she started Broadway, I think at the age of 6, and she can tell us more about that, but you've seen her in movies like Fire Creek and Zorro. I mean, just so many TV series and shows that she has worked on. Please welcome Miss Barbara Luna. And next to Barbara is a gentleman that I spoke to a few minutes earlier, and we were talking about the things that he has done, and it sounded like we could do a career, whole panel thing on him. He's a comedy writer. He does cartoon voices, so many things this gentleman has done. His name is Ted Lang. Let's welcome Ted Lang. And the next is a very pretty lady. I first met her a few years ago. She's done a lot of TV work. She's very, I think she's on the board of the Screen Actors Guild, fighting for causes, and we can speak about that. A very beautiful lady and talented actress, Angel Tompkins. Right next to Ted.
Oh, no.
And now here's a guy, I tell you. This guy, I know you've seen him on Dukes of Hazzard. I enjoyed his work in a movie called Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which I thought he did a great job and great makeup. Please welcome Don Pedro Colley. Over there. Don, right over this way. You want to come with this? What?
What are we doing, boy?
I want to put you right next to Luna. 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 Okay, we can start. If anybody has questions out there, we can start with the audience. Any questions out there?
He's starting already. This chair is so low.
Yes, this gentleman right down here.
Will you get this girl a phone book?
Okay, the question is for Luna, for your working on Winchester 73.
Yes.
What was it?
You know, if it wasn't for you people, I wouldn't know what I did. Can you all hear him? What did I? How come I can't hear him? What?
He asked about your role on Winchester 73.
I don't know. What did I do? I mean, is that? Oh, that was the one with Tom Tryon and John Saxon. Yes. Oh, you're the guy. I set up my table yesterday. It took me 4 hours. Notice I have 2 tables. I have everything out there. He comes up to me.
I noticed, Luna.
First thing
part of mine. I noticed.
Good. Thank you for not bringing any photos. What?
I noticed, Luna. Thank you.
Holy
I
cow.
noticed.
For somebody who brought no photos, she is doing so much action. What the hell are you doing over there?
I'm putting out, Luna. Because you don't.
Oh my.
You all know Angel Hussey Tompkins.
Oh, I love it when you say my name.
So he says to me, do you have any photos from Winchester 73? I said, no. How about Hawaii
He
5-0?
said, how did you like your role on
No,
Winchester?
earlier yesterday morning I said I put out all these photos, and then he asked me about Winchester 73 yesterday, to which I had no photos. I mean, I spent a fortune on those photos, and you asked me about a photo I don't have. You see this scar on my hand? I have 2 scars right there. Can you see that? No. Here, zoom in on that. That's from Winchester 73. Tom Tryon. Anybody else see the Winchester 73? It was the movie of the week. And I was supposed to be dealing cards, and he was supposed to put my hands behind my back and flip the gun out of my hand, and he flipped my hand over on this table that was a card table, you know, that green fuzzy felty stuff. Bleeding, scarred. That was one of the memories of Winchester 73. Other than that, it was a wonderful show. I mean, you know, I played so many Mexican senoritas that it's kind of hard to tell what I did on what.
What do you remember about working with Tom?
Tom,
He abused her.
these scars.
That's it, okay.
What else is there to remember?
All right, we will move on. Next question, Jerry.
Yes, it's kind of a broad question. Some actors that have roles that just kind of stop their career and then they have to really work to get it back. Any of y'all remember any roles that you had that you just wish you had never taken because you had to work to get back?
The question is, and it's for everyone here,
Yes.
any roles that you have done
Yes.
that you
Yes.
wish you never did?
Yes. I did a television series. I did the pilot called Probe for Warner Brothers. And then I did the series as a regular role as Hugh O'Brien's love interest, where I was a telemetry medical technician, and I could zap him and give him an electrical jolt through an implant that he had when he was always flirting with other women. Well, the role that I hated was negotiator, because what Leslie Stevens, the producer, had promised me that when I was in the inside the control unit, where my working days would be limited, I would receive $1,500 for my work as an actress, as a regular. However, they had plans for me, which was to have me go out with Hugh O'Brien or one of the other investigators, because this was a worldwide search. It was very futuristic and ahead of itself. If I went out in the field as a field officer with them, which was kind of like a sidekick, I would get paid $3,500. Well, at that time, because of the series and the constant jolts I would give him, both verbally and physically, through my console, I had the highest television TVQ in business at that time, and NBC was always doing press junkets. Well, there is one episode where I finally get out of the unit and I work more days. And when I finally got my check for that episode, the check was $1,500. So I went to my agents and I said, this is not correct because you made a side deal with a producer that I was going to get paid $3,500, and then I was a single parent raising my son by myself. And you know, with children, you need the money forever. He's 40 now, and I still need the money. And he said, oh, okay. So then, but I'm not going to sign this check. I need to be paid the $3,500, which then forced me to be a negotiator because the producer did not back me up. So suddenly Warner Brothers calls me into their office, and these are the executives of television and with NBC, and they said, we need to release this episode. It is finished, it is final cut, and we have an air date, and we need to release it. And I said, well, fine, just pay me my money. And they had me tell that story of what the producer promised me probably about 10 times to about 10 different executives at Warner Brothers, which placed me in a very precarious position because then I was no longer their favorite actress. I was a union actress asking for what I was promised, which was really a simple deal. They said, okay, fine. They finally gave me the check, and you will not see me in any further episodes. And I was blacklisted from working on Warner Brothers lot by the studio for the next 10 years. So yes, I loved doing that role. There is an incredible amount of press out there, but it caused me to almost have a totally ruined career because I simply asked for the money I was promised. And so now, you asked me what was my favorite role and which one wish I had never taken. That was the role.
Luna, do you have one?
So why didn't you put out?
You get the money first, Luna. You know that. You get the money
You might have
first,
gotten it.
and then you put out. See, the negotiation isn't complete without the
She's
money.
lying. She's lying.
Luna, do you have a role that you wish you'd never done?
Sitting here next to me.
No, I really can't think of any. I loved them all.
Okay, MAKO, you have one?
Yes, it is a role of being a spokesperson for a group of actors back in early 60s. No, wait a minute. Mid-60s, I would say. What happened is that you all know a series called Kung Fu with David Carradine playing the Kane. You all know that, right? I like him as an actor. But from my understanding, my having conversation way before, it was meant to be Bruce Lee. His idea was conceived and dramatized into a teleplay. So I felt, hey, it's about time that Asian American actors or Asian actors would portray the central character. But nobody wanted to be a spokesperson of that group. So I said, if that's the case, I will be the spokesperson. And we met with a network, studio, executive producer, so on, so on, so forth. But to no avail. And because of that, I was not hired for an episode at all until when it was on its final leg in the third season or whatever. Just meaningless 3-day work, you know. So, but I don't regret the fact that I represented a group of actors because we felt it was time. And I might mention, when meeting with one of the Warner Brothers vice presidents, studio has many vice presidents. And one one of them said to us, if we put Yellow Man on the tube, viewers would turn it off. I mean, those were his exact words. But now, I think time is slowly changing. It's not fast enough for my pace, but it is changing. And now you see Pat Morita coming on, as a funny man and leading character in Karate Kid. And he had, 2 series? Maybe that was not too successful. Those were not too successful, but he did have a chance to be the leading person, So things are changing, but it's not fast enough for me. And there is a wonderful, wonderful English word for that. Fiddlestick.
Okay, let's go to Ted. Ted, you have the best version of how you and Angel met?
Well, yeah, actually, Angel and I met. I was formerly married to a fashion model, and I was writing The Tonight Show, and I saw this woman who looked like Angel, and she was at the gym. I was terrified, and I thought, geez, this woman is so pretty. This could be such a mistake. But I walked up to her anyway, and I introduced myself, and she was familiar with some of the stuff that I was writing at that point. So she said, can I have your address? I said, yes. And I lived at that time in a place called Longridge Estates on Mary Ellen Avenue, which was a bunch of houses. And one day I came home from Fox, and there was this woman out in front of my home with a silver goblet like this that was filled with butter and a huge salmon that she was going to barbecue for me on my inside barbecue. And that was our first dinner. And it's been history since that time, I'll tell you.
Now, is that the correct version, Angel? Is that about right?
I think it was.
When we met at the gym, which is correct, I was on this machine which is for your derriere, and your leg keeps going up and you have to push it down, and it's up and it's down, and it's generally always on a platform. And there was this young man standing there. That was about 18 years ago.
Young man.
And I'm up and down with my leg, and I'm watching him. You have to hold on to this bar. And I finally said, if you raise your eyes up a little higher, you could see my breasts. And he went, and he just was speechless. And I got down and I showed him how to do the machine. And I said, and he started laughing because he was terrified. And then I said, you write comedy? Okay. Can I have your address? Because that's what I enjoy. I enjoyed his laughter. And we've been together ever since.
See, I knew there was more to it.
He eventually raised his eyes up, though.
Okay, questions out there? Any questions? Yes, right there. I didn't get to hear that.
He was asking about George Lucas. How is George to work with? We were fortunate enough to be in his very first science fiction film. Actually, it started out as a student project at USC. It was about a 10-minute short, something called Electronic Passageway or something or other. And because of Francis Ford Coppola, they were able to get $1 million out of Warner Brothers and take it to Coppola's studios in San Francisco to work on this film. And they had auditioned just about every African American they could around San Francisco and places for the part. And fortunately, I had known Robert Duvall because we all stayed in the theatrical hotel in Hollywood called the Montecito. We used to play flag football, and we'd go down to the pool and tell lies with the rest of the people, So Robert suggested that they bring me in for an audition. And I went up and had the right stuff at that time. And then we started to work. And George is one fantastic technician when it comes to film. But actors and actresses, they bother him a lot. He wants in his mind's eye for them to be chess pieces, to be moved about at his discretion so that he can work his technical wizardry. Well, Sir Donald Pleasance and Robert Duvall and me included, we would capture George before we would do a scene and say, George, you cannot shoot a scene this way. These are real human beings who are caught in your society, and we're trying to survive in it. And you have to allow us to be able to be that very thing. And George would get all pissed and go mumbling off, wander off somewhere, and he'd come back, and we'd shoot a scene, and the thing would be just so vibrant and so electric. And they would say, cut and print. And George would be very unhappy because he was a brand new filmmaker, and he didn't understand this. He thought that we were destroying his beautiful project that he had in his mind's eye, which in essence was totally static and one-dimensional, and we brought the other three dimensions by our characters. So, you know, it was a good thing, because in talking to him, we were able to get his concept clearer in his eyes as well as in our eyes. So when we went out there and worked, and it was fun, and we said, yeah, and this was nice, and who knew that 35, 40 years later, we had done a cult film classic that almost every filmmaker since then has used as a model, role model, instruction model. I can't even begin to name the number of film that filmmakers have lifted whole concepts out of our THX movie and used the idea for their own movies. So it was an exciting time. And now, I was just with Mr. Lucas in June of this year. I got a chance to visit him on his 6,000-acre Skywalker Ranch. And he said it's still his most favorite movie. He is re-editing it and cleaning up the negative, adding a couple of scenes here and there, and releasing it on DVD, come out the New Year's. It'll be out New Year's on DVD.
Luna, you have worked with a lot of great actors. I remember one movie, The Devil, at 4 o'clock, working with Frank Sinatra, Spencer Tracy. What do you remember about that experience?
So I'm sitting on the airplane, and I'm so excited. I mean, can you imagine Frank Sinatra and Spencer Tracy? So I couldn't eat. I was just... So I get off the plane, and they had already started filming. So the escort picks me up and takes me to the restaurant where they are sitting and eating their Chinese food. Well, by now I'm starving. So I sit down, and here's Frank Sinatra, Mervyn LeRoy, the director, and the rest of the cast. So they bring me a bowl of chicken egg drop soup. And I'm trying to pay attention to what Frank Sinatra is saying, but I want to eat. So he's talking, and I'm starting to, and I take a sip of my chicken egg drop soup, and I'm so nervous, and I choke, and it goes into my windpipe, and the egg drop just flies out of my face, and I look at Frank Sinatra, and he is wearing the egg on his face. I live to tell it.
Send her back home.
I thought I was dead. So, and working with them was really interesting because, and I was just talking about this to somebody who asked me that before. The Frank Sinatra is, I mean, it's a known fact that he just does not rehearse. You know, you do everything, and then Mr. Sinatra comes out on the set, and then you go. So please God, you should have all of your dialogue and know what you're doing. Whereas Spencer Tracy loved to rehearse. So as an actress, it was really challenging to be able to be, you know, able to work both ways.
Let me ask you about another film you did, Fire Creek, with two other great gentlemen, James
Can you
Stewart
imagine this?
and
I mean,
Henry
I have
Fonda.
worked with the best people. The films I thought were not so great. I mean, I thought the films were not Jimmy Stewart's best. Not that they were bad. They could never be bad, but just not their better films. Even The Devil at 4 O'Clock I thought was just okay. But they were amazing. You know, when I left New York City as a kid, everybody always said, now you look out for them actors. You know how they are. They only want one thing. Of course, she hopes for that all the time, but that's her.
Money, get the
You know,
money.
I'm sure she put out on your first date, right?
Actually, Barbara, it took about 4 months
Get out of here.
A year.
because she was with another guy.
Oh, well, there you have it. What was I saying? Before I interrupted
Jimmy
myself.
Stewart
Oh,
and
yes.
Henry Fonda.
So everybody said when you get out there, you better be careful because, you know, they only want one thing, those actors. So, that's all you want, isn't it?
Yeah, money. Want the money first.
So when we were doing Fire Creek and I met Henry Fonda, and as he approached me, I thought, okay, here it comes. Here comes Henry Fonda. I could see that gleam in his eye. And he sat down next to me and he said, those are just beautiful moccasins. And I thought, oh, now that's a good one. Moccasins, okay, we'll start with moccasins. Where's this guy going? And he said, where did you get those moccasins? And he just went on and on about these moccasins. And I thought, when is he ever going to really get to it? But about 5 minutes later, he said, you know, my wife would just look so good in those. Don't you think that's funny? I mean, I've been waiting. It was the same thing when I worked with Guy Williams on Zorro. I thought, gee, any minute, you know, he's just going to flirt with me any second, and he never did either. So I just figured there's something wrong with me.
Okay, let's go to questions. Questions out there, Roddy? For MAKO.
Who was the best and easiest martial arts personality and actor you've had to work with?
Who's the best martial artist, actor he worked with?
And easiest one to work with?
And easiest to work with?
Easiest to work with is Chuck Norris, because we come from a similar school. Background is very similar, but they are all very easy to work with. Actually, all of those people, wonderful people. It's just the styles are different. Some, you know, with some of them, so you have to make an adjustment according to the, you know, style. And most amazing person was, of course, Bruce Lee, without qualifying it. And the next one is Jackie Chan. He is a perfectionist. He is what you call indefatigable worker. He never stops. He has so much energy. I don't know where it comes from. I hope he wasn't taking dopes, you know. But it's, so long as you come in somewhat prepared, they're very easy to work with and willing to give and willing to take.
How well did you know Bruce Lee? Off camera also?
Somewhat.
And what would surprise us to know about him that normally we wouldn't know?
No, I can't talk about that in this region of the country. Because otherwise it'll be simple and people will have to repent. Those who ask that question must repent. Amen.
Which, by the way, go on. And you asked me about Jimmy Stewart, and I never really answered. I mean, there's not much to say about him other than that he was really a very, very special human being. I mean, what you see is what you get. The only thing about him when working with him is he really kept you on your toes because you never knew when he was talking or when he was acting because it was all... You know what I mean? What you see is what he was.
Did it seem like Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda, were they close on the set? Close friends?
Oh, clearly, yeah. They had tremendous respect for each other and loved each other very much, yeah.
How about rehearsal time?
They
Were
loved to
into
rehearse.
rehearse?
Yeah, loved to rehearse, yes.
Okay, Ted, you're, I don't know how many people know, but his comedy writing and all the shows that he has written for, there's a large list. Let's start with...
Well, I can tell you how it started.
There we go.
I came from San Francisco, and I was with a group called The Committee, which was an improv group. And we were performing at the Committee Theater in North Beach. Some of the guys decided, you know, we could do so much better if we went to Los Angeles, and there's this show called the Smothers Brothers Show. And one of them had spoken, I think it was Alan Meyerson, to Tommy Smothers at the time. And so we went to the Tiffany Theater, which was on Sunset, and we began to do sketches. Now, in those days, I did voices because I stuttered a lot, and I was very comfortable with doing voices, which I still do. But after being with them, I heard that you could just walk onto the lot of a lot of the studios, and I figured that would be a good way to try to sell some of the comedy sketches that I had written and couldn't sell to the committee. So I went over to NBC, which was near where I was staying, and I walked onto the set of several shows, one of them being Laugh-In, and I met one of the writers there, and I wrote a couple sketches with him, Jack Hanrahan. And from that, I went over with Alan Bly and Chris Beard and did another show, which was called The Andy Williams Show. From there, I went and worked under Herb Baker on the Flip Wilson Show. And after Flip, I did Sanford and Son. Interestingly, on Sanford and Son, when I was a kid growing up in the Bay Area, there was this black place called Don Barksdale's Showcase on Telegraph Avenue. And they had people like Richard Pryor and Arthur Prysock. And one day I was walking down the street and I saw this name, Red Fox, with two D's and two X's. And I thought, you know, that's a pretty strange way to spell a name. So I went back that evening, and I was a kid. I was about 14, and I looked much younger than 14. But they let me in, and that was on a Monday night, and I came back on Tuesday night, and Wednesday night, and Thursday night. And I was virtually one of about 3 or 4 people in the audience because the club only filled on Friday and Saturday. So on Friday, I walked in a little bit after it opened, and the place was just jammed, you know. And so one of the, I guess you'd call him a bouncer, said, "You can't be in this place." And all of a sudden from the stage, Red Fox, who was up there, said, "Listen, that little white boy has been here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. These suckers weren't even here. He stays." And from that came my entree onto Sanford and Son. But for the bulk of my career, I guess I'd have to say I wrote a lot of comedy punch-up because I really enjoyed going in and editing. My great uncle, who was, you know, my family's very conservative. They didn't like entertainment at all, except that my grandfather ran the entertainment at the Bohemian Club in San Francisco, which was pretty risque. But my other uncle was Lucien Hubbard, who produced, which I happen to find right here, this was his favorite film, which was called The Vanishing American. And he produced this back in the 20s or the 30s, I believe it was the early 30s, and made an honorary a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. He also produced the first Academy Award-winning film, so which was Wings in 1927, 28. Yeah, well, and so what happened? I did not want to use that name. And so I was so underground throughout my career trying to hide the fact that that I was related to Lucien, and I think this is counterproductive, by the way, if any kids are out there that want to get into a business, because one of the things you definitely should do is use every connection you can possibly use, and I did not, and I regret that. Some of the voices I do, I can do Johnny Carson, I wrote that show for years, and he was probably a neat guy to write for. I wrote for Bob Hope. Bob Hope, without question in my mind, was the nicest man I ever met. My agent at that time was Abby Greschler of Diamond Artists, who handled Jack Klugman and Tony Randall and Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis and a whole bunch of people. But he introduced me to Bob Hope one day at NBC, and Hope said, "Why don't you just give me a few pages?" So the very next morning, I dropped off the pages I'd written to his house in Toluca Lake, little guardhouse. And the following morning, about 8:30 a.m., I got a call. And the man said, "Is this Ted Lang?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "This is Bob Hope." He said, "I want to thank you for the material." That is the only person I've written for, aside from Joan Rivers, that actually has come across and thanked me as a writer, because we're so far behind in the scenes of this business that it's just a remarkable thing.
And there's a famous cartoon character voice that you have done. Can you do that for us?
Well, of course I can. I actually love doing this voice because when I was a stutterer, this is how I stopped stuttering.
And later on, I was the second voice of Bullwinkle. I did it for commercials and backup on intros for the television show. Bill Scott. Bill Scott did the first voice. Luna. Notice I didn't call you Barbara. I didn't call you
Angel,
Barbara.
there's a film. How many of you seen a movie called Little Cigars? It's one of my favorite films. I guess I'm the only one here, I guess. It's a fun film.
Yeah, well, that's for short people.
Yeah, for
I
short
was the tallest
people.
person there.
Billy Curtis and Jerry Marin. What was that whole experience like?
Well, I got to tell you, when they first asked me to do this film, the producer of the show, who later ended up running a major studio, brought in and said, and the producer decided that the studio executive did not know the difference between a dwarf and a midget. So he wanted things changed to be really awful and without taste. So he brought in about 30 midgets, and one was a lawyer and a doctor, and a paramedic, and just all walks of life. And then he finally understood the distinctions between a dwarf and a midget. And finally he said, "Well, we can't do those things that I suggested to these people. I mean, they'll run us out of town." And that's the producer said, "That's what I'm trying to tell you." So they brought me in, and I thought, "Oh my God, I've just come from shooting with one of the most magnificent men, which was Lee Marvin, on Prime Cut, and I'm down to midgets. Good grief, my career is dead." I must tell you that film has become a cult film. And what they mean by a cult film is it plays and plays and plays to an audience that when and where it's played, it is sought out, and the box office is wonderful every time they run it. And working with them was terrific. But they smelled. And I could tell that it was them because it was wafting up from where they stood around me. And I couldn't figure it out, and I was trying to be polite, and I finally said, "Do you guys take showers?" "Oh, yes, the little hands go up." I said, "How often?" And they said, "Oh, every day. And I said, "What kind of soap do you use?" And they told me, and I thought, well, that seems to be all right. And I bent over and I just said, "Oh, just a minute." I said, "I have to fix something." And I pretended like I was just fixing the top of their head, and I was smelling each head. And it was awful. And they never washed their hair. And I couldn't figure it out. And I said, "When you take this shower, don't you shampoo your hair?" And they said, "Oh, no." And I said, "Why?" And they all chimed in together, and they said, "Well, it's because our hair will fall out." And I said, "Well, how often do you wash your hair?" "Maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks." And I says, "Come here with me. And I took them over to the makeup artist. I says, is there a bucket of water and some shampoo here? And they said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It'll fall out. And I said, you either do what I say, or I will step on not only your lines, but your feet and your face at the same time. And I washed their hair, and I made sure it was blow dried, and they looked terrific. And I said, now you do this every day. I said, do you see my hair? And it was very long. And they said, yeah, every day you're kidding. They came in, they were clean, they didn't smell any longer, and the only thing I had to smell from then on were these huge cigars. But they were wonderful to work with. They were all pros, and I'm sorry to say that only one of the midgets is presently still alive today. And that was Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry, and wasn't one of the midgets Felix Sela?
Yeah,
Felix is still with
Felix
us.
is still alive, but Jerry was the last one to die.
No, Jerry's still alive.
Jerry's still alive.
Yeah, Billy Curtis passed away.
Yes,
who was the
he
main...
did. This man was incredible. Now, he was the lead midget in these robberies. He was marrying women taller than me and gorgeous, right and left. And I think just before he died, he got married again. His favorite line, God bless his soul, was, look, baby, just want to tell you something. I'm as good as man as any man. And I'd say, yeah? He said, yeah. Nose to nose, my toes is in it. Toes to toes, my nose is in it. And I can do things you couldn't even dream of. And I said, I'll take your word for it, Billy. Thank you so much. More than I wanted to know.
Okay, more questions out there? Any more questions? Let's talk to MAKO about working with Steve McQueen and the Sand Pebbles, which you were nominated for Best Supporting Actor. What was that experience like?
Working with Steve McQueen, and prior to meeting him, I've heard many, many stories about how wild he was and how like he was a speed demon and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, if he gets wild, I can control him, you know. I can control myself, rather, and I can deal with it. And then, when I was first introduced to Steve in director Robert Wise's office, Robert Wise said, Steve, this is MAKO. MAKO, this is Steve. And Steve looked at me, hi. That was a beginning, just thumbs up, you know. And he was not really a talkative person. And he is like many other actors who like to rehearse. He likes rehearsing just as much as any other actors. And one day, during the course of rehearsal in the engine room, I was scratching my head like this, and he said, MAKO, you gonna scratch your head like that? I said, what? Why? No, I just wonder. So our relationship was not really the one that filled with wonderful English words, you know. It was done with feeling, visual thing. That means hi. How you doing? And if he's feeling good, I do the same thing. You know, it's easy, you know. So it was very normal, I felt. For me, it was very normal and wonderful relationship.
How long of a shoot was that?
It took over a year and a few months. Oh, I might as well tell you, on the night of Academy Award, we had to get ourselves into tuxedos and whatnot, and you go to the venue wherever it was. I forgot where it was. What was funny is that with that money from the Sand Pebbles, I bought a brand new car, first time in my life for myself. Volkswagen station wagon. Station wagon. It was a Volkswagen camper. And we all had a big sticker in our windshield, you know, Academy Award guest. And we get to the site, huge parking lot, and many tired cops standing around, kept directing this VW camper into a far and very remote corner of the parking lot, whereas all the limo and Cadillacs and Benz and whatnot, guests were being dropped off, but we had to go to the far corner and walk all the way back into the theater. Well, anyway, we didn't get it. We didn't get any of the awards except art director, Boris Levin. I think he's the only one who got an award. And during the course of night, we had to, we also had to eat and drink and so on and so forth. And when it was time for us to go, we went over to Steve. My wife and I went over to Steve and said, well, we didn't do it, but see you. Then he said that same famous, wonderful English word, fiddlestick. We'll do it again. So that was the end of our relationship, sort of. But from then on, I was invited to his house for informal gathering, and every time I'm on location or something with Jackie Chan or whatever, a lot of stunt guys would be calling Steve's home and talking to Steve, and he discovers that I was in a picture. So again, doing this telephone conversation with Steve is very difficult because I can't see him, I can't feel him. So he and I would be saying, how you doing? Okay. You okay? Yeah. Everything okay? Yeah. So it was that kind of a relationship.
Don, was it a good experience working on the TV series The Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah, it was, I'm from Oregon, and all the car stunts and drive-ins and the craziness on the road, we used to do that when we were kids. We'd go down into my street, and the farmer had this great big field down there, and he'd plow the field, and then at night he'd leave the tractors out in the field. Well, all of his kids would sneak down the field in the middle of the night and steal these tractors and have all these time trials out through his freshly plowed yard. And so by the time I got to Dukes of Hazzard, because of a producer that I had worked with before on Daktari, long ago series, on the Daktari show, they wanted me to do a limited stunt, but they were kind of afraid that I'd get hurt and they'd have to go get a stunt guy to do it. That's what they're supposed to do. But back in those days, in like about 1967, they didn't have African American stunt guys that they could call on, and especially anybody as big as me. So I took it on myself. I told Leonard, I said, listen, if you have to stop this production, it's going to cost a lot of money. This is costing money. Let's not do this. I mean, nobody likes that. I tell you what, I'll do the stunt for you. He says, well, are you sure? You won't sue me if you get hurt. I said, no. Let's do this. Let's keep going here. Let's get this thing out of the way. And it was a stunt in which I played a tribal chieftain. I'm wearing a loincloth, and I have to run across this field in about waist-high grass, slide down a slight embankment, roll over the cameras behind me, showing what was chasing me through this field. So they said, and action. I run, boogity, 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 and I slide down the thing and roll over, and the guy says, cut, print, that's great. And then I hear somebody say, oh my God, I don't believe it. What? Well, when I slid down the embankment, it was all gravel underneath, and I was bareback, so when I rolled over, my back looked like somebody had taken a garden rake to my back. Oh, now Leonard, he's jumping up and down. He just knows that I'm going to be like every actor in Hollywood. They're going to start suing and screaming and hollering and blah, blah, blah. I said, nah, heck, just get the nurse over here and tender me up and let's keep moving. Let's keep moving. God, don't stop for stuff like this. So the nurse came over and she put iodine on my scratches on my back. I worked pretty good, but we kept going. So years later, Mr. Kaufman now is a line producer on Dukes of Hazzard. And he calls me into Warner Brothers one day and he says, we have this character on this show called Sheriff Lucas, but we're going to develop him. He's never said any words before now, but he's going to say some words. He says, you know, I never forgot what you did for me. I said, wow, that's really incredible. Sure, I'll be more than happy to give them my best in terms of a reading. So I said, now, okay, I've got to go in and do an audition. I've got to be this evil sheriff from, not evil, but just a sheriff from Georgia. And it was about that time there was a very popular rock and roll song around called I Shot the Sheriff. and I found out that's what a lot of the fellows used to do, put notches in their gun by shooting at the police department and the sheriff's department. I even ran into a young sheriff, a young man, nice young blonde man. He said he was a sheriff in Oatmeal, Texas. I said, you said was. Well, he said, because it was too damn dangerous, I had to leave the job. You know, my wife just wouldn't let me go to work anymore. They'd shoot at you just for the hell of it, just because that was what they did. So I said, okay, now I got to create a character that is, he's so official that everybody even be afraid to shoot at him. So I went to meet Paul Picard that morning by wearing the biggest pair of cowboy boots I ever had, and a big leather coat and a big cowboy 10-gallon hat. And as I'm sitting in the outer office, I'm all scared and nervous, and it's my big shot at a series and the whole thing. And so they said, okay, you can go into the office and see Mr. Picard. So I got up, put my costume on, straightened everything. I went to the door, and I went, boom! I blew in his office and slammed the door behind me and just stood there glaring at him. And his paperwork went everywhere. It scared the hell out of me. And he's shuffling paper, and then he says, your name is Don Pedro Colley, and you're here to read the part. I didn't say anything. I just glared at him. He says, you're ready to read now? I didn't say anything. I just glared at him. And so he says, okay, well, let's start out. So I started out reading, the part. And in the course of the part, there was a section in which I'm supposed to cock my shotgun on Roscoe and Boss Hogg. I don't have a shotgun in Warner Brothers. I don't think they would let anybody do that. But if I'm thinking, the line says cow chips, cocking a shotgun, cow chips. Okay, I can make it sound like that. So when it came to the part, I went, cow chips, boom! And he came up out of his seat like and we finished the scene, and it was only then that I came out of character. By now you could see the sweat was running off his lip and thing. And I thanked him, and I went out of the office and I went over to see Mr. Leonard, and I said, thank you ever so for the shot. And then by the time I got to work, it was like they included me in the Dukes of Hazzard family, and it was marvelous. I got to do some drive-ins and what they call drive-ins. You get in your patrol car and you come down off the hill, and then you jam on the emergency brake and slide into the camera. You don't hit the camera, but you get out and grab your shotgun, or you either run and jump in the car, and you start it, gas pedal to the floor, and while it's revving up, then's when you jam it in gear. And it leaves 12, 15-foot rooster tail of dirt, rocks, and gravel that zoom in and out. It was great fun. And now Dukes of Hazzard as a show is why it's bigger than peanut butter. My God, you see movies that they make references to Dukes of Hazzard, or they use the car, or television shows, commercial ads. And when we do a convention, there's like almost 5,000 people that come now from Europe. This last one, I met 2 people from Holland. We were on our way to Paris, and we heard about Dukes of Hazzard, so we came all the way over here instead of going to Paris. 2 people from Greece, 2 people from Italy, all over the Americas. 30, 40 individually owned General Lee cars show up. We have a car chase. They got a big circus tent. They have country music. They do barbecue and catfish and red soda pop, and 3 days is the best carnival you ever saw in your life. It's really amazing how big that show is now, really.
Okay, why don't we bring up the subject of love scenes? And let's go to Luna first on this. I mean, we're not asking for names. If you want to throw names
Okay,
out.
William Shatner's a good kisser, but Michael Landon was the best.
Well, that answers some.
When I say the best, I mean, some of you know by now because of my photos that I married Doug McClure. So when I guested on Overland Trail, and that's where we met and then got married, he was obviously the best kisser, but second to he. But before I talk about that, I just want to tell you one thing very quickly. Because when you said distinction, it reminded me of that I actually have a distinction of being in one of the worst films ever made. It was the life story of Che Guevara, and that was played by Omar Sharif. God. And Fidel Castro was played by
Jack Palance?
Well, however the hell you pronounce his name. So the first day that I met him, Jack Well, Palance or Palance, I don't know. So
I had Jack Palance.
Of course you did.
I've had Doug.
What?
Of course you have.
I wouldn't have Michael
did not
Landon.
know
I worked
tell
with
that
Jack
story.
Palance too, you know.
I did not
Marco,
know
who
that.
have
Mr.
you had?
Tompkins.
You know,
He used to, because people weren't doing things, he used to do one-handed push-ups on the stage.
He was great. And what else? Who we've been
Let's
crossing
put it
over-
this way.
Why
Is there
didn't we
anybody
live
who
next
didn't
door?
have-
It'd make their driving shorter.
How about
So-
her husband? Never had him.
so we're having lunch, you know.
You got lunch?
Yeah, this was a big movie. Omar Sharif, come on, give me a
Oh
break.
my God! Did he play bridge?
No.
Okay.
So we're sitting at lunch, and I'm sitting across from Miss Jack Palance or Palance.
Palance.
And I looked at him and I said, well, how, I mean, he just kept staring at me. I didn't know what to say to him. You know, he's like Steve McQueen. You know, there's that whole group of guys, the Bronsons, the Brandos, the McQueens, they don't say a whole lot. They just kind of, yup. So I said to him, well, just to break the silence, I said, well, how do you pronounce your name? And he said, Jack.
He had a deviated septum.
Jack. I still don't know how to pronounce his name.
You remind me of my first wife.
Palance.
She took all of my art. I had this gorgeous home in Beverly Hills. She took every one of my pieces of art I collected with all the pictures that I did.
How do you
to meet
pronounce
you,
your name?
Jack? Nice to meet you.
He actually almost threw Omar Sharif off the mountain.
How did that happen?
Should have thrown Omar Sharif off the mountain.
I mean, two actors that were so different from each other. Omar Sharif probably still is, if not more, an extremely eccentric human being.
What about
Actually,
your...
he chased Johnny Carson around his desk once
What?
on The Tonight Show.
Who did?
Jack.
Oh.
Jack.
Was that before or after he did push-ups? Remember when he
That
did
was
push-ups?
before
on
the push-ups. It was terrifying.
First time I went to dinner, we were doing a stage play called Heaven Can Wait, and we're in a little place called Park City, Nevada, and we're trying to eat dinner as a company, you know, and these people, oh my God, it's Jack Palance, would you please give us an autograph, please, sir? And this is my first experience with a big Hollywood star, and I'm thinking, wow, he'd probably be pretty magnanimous and everything. He'd snatch the paper out of his hand, slam it on it, and he'd great circles all over the paper, and he'd like a frisbee throw us across the room. Person would have to run over and catch it and come back, and I was so embarrassed, my God. And they'd say, oh, thank you, Jack. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. They'd kiss his shoes. It just was insane the way. And then doing the play, we had some folding chairs on stage. We're in a big 3,000-seat theater in the round, and the doggone chair collapsed. You know, now that kind of half throws an actor, actors. Not Jack, he took the collapsed chair and took it like a frisbee and threw it out across the orchestra pit. Crash, bang. And one of the poor little girls in this show, she had such a crush on him, but she was trying so very, very hard to do her part, and she'd get all lost and confused. Jack had flopped down on the stage and started doing one-handed push-ups. And you're trying to work through all of this. It helps when you have to, it helps your concentration when you got such a distraction. What a wild man, I loved it.
Luna, what about your worst love scene? Never had none? No?
I don't think so. How can you have a bad love scene with me?
Well, make a love.
Give me a break.
Never had a love scene with someone that you didn't like? No?
Nope.
Okay. Well, Angel, how about your love scenes?
I thought you'd never ask. I must tell you, one of the nicest experiences was playing in Murphy's Law with Charles Bronson. Was just a delightful man. I had met him actually I made it a point to find him on the set of The Mechanic, and because I really wanted to work with him, and I had an interview with the director, Michael Winner, which was a complete putz. And don't ask me what that is. I have a different definition than most people. But I went on the set, and there was Charles Bronson. And I went over and I introduced myself, and I said, you're Charles Bronson, aren't you? And he went, yeah. And he was very, a little skeptical, very quiet. And I said, didn't you used to do a lot of Westerns and military films? And he looked at me and he said, no, I've never done one. I said, oh, I thought you had. No. That's all he said. And 15 years later, when I was cast in the film, I had actually submitted myself for the role to play his wife in Murphy's Law. And I got an interview with the casting director, and then interviewed with the producer, who was his lovely wife. And she was actually responsible for my having been cast in that role. And I can remember I asked Lee J. Thompson, who was in his 70s at that time and directing the film, and I said, you want me to play a stripper and really to do this well and be believable? I said, I need a dance choreographer. And they said, well, what for? I said, well, to be a stripper is a highly stylized dance that is choreographed. This is not, you don't just come out and start taking off your clothes and flipping a veil. And they said, well, how long will you need? And I said, well, let me find the choreographer that I want, or at least that knows how to do this. And I said, she'll be able to tell you. So we rehearsed for about a week and a half, and you can see the finished results, which is very professional on the film, which just came out in DVD, called Murphy's Law. I'm doing this scene, and we're shooting this all day in the supposedly strip club in the middle of Chinatown in Los Angeles, and the background actors are clapping and cheering, and I'm coming out, and I've got the smoke and the ice, and the gloves are coming off, and the up and down the pole, and the backwards and forwards, and zipping the dress, and the veil, and coming off, and then not seeing anything, and bare top, and on and on and on. And we do this, I guess, probably about 8 times, and then we break for lunch. And I'm coming off the stage in a bathrobe, and I look in the back of the room, and there, sitting way in the back at a table, is Charles Bronson. And I go, oh! And he looks at me, and he smiles, and he says, "You're doing good, Angel." And that's all he ever said. And the reason why he was there in his quiet professional way, because he was a very quiet man, was he was watching the show and how I worked and creating his feelings, so that when we had to do our scene together, when he comes into the bar, into the strip joint, and he comes in and he confronts his wife as to why I am working the way I'm working, he's created a whole sense and a feeling. And I know what he did because Jill Ireland, who was his lovely wife at that time, and the producer handpicked me because we were so similar in a very classic featured way, including the blue eyes. He was actually he was thinking of her as being the stripper up there and how he would react to her doing that, not as a film actress, but in real life. And he was just delightful. And of course, Lee J. Thompson was English, so he was very proper, and a very thin frail man. And he'd come and he'd be directing, and he'd say, well, okay, well, yeah, we'll have it over here, and you have to do clap, clap, clap for Miss Tompkins when she comes out, and she's going to do her wiggle woggle. You know the wiggle woggle? She says, good, Miss Tompkins, you do your wiggle woggle? And I said, yes, I'll wiggle and I'll woggle. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience working for them. Unfortunately, he cast his best friend as my husband, new husband to be in that film. And he was a good actor, fair actor, but he was not as handsome and is not as personable as, of course, Charles Bronson was. And the other delicious man to work with was Lee Marvin, who is just a dream to work with. If you were a good actor, he loved to act, and he would act with you, and he was very giving. But my least favorite actor to work with in the love scene that I most remember as the most difficult to do was with Anthony Quinn. And I can honestly say that Anthony Quinn was a pig to leading lady that he worked with. And I was forewarned, and I wrote about this very honestly because I was forewarned by one of the head of the studio executives at Universal to watch out for him very carefully. And I said, why? He said, because he uses every trick in the world to steal your close-ups and your scene from you. And what he will do is that he will act very wonderfully and be very kind and very generous, and the minute the camera turns around to you so that they do a master shot, like we would be the master shot, and they would shoot us both together in the same scene, and then they would do his close-ups, and then they would do my close-ups, and then they would intercut, so they would see us together talking, close on him, close on me, and the responses that we would do. And what he did was he said, would you do me a favor, darling? I said, sure, if I can do it. He said, just rub my leg under the table while I'm doing my scene. Just rub my leg. So I said, oh, fine. I would stop. You like that? I do get good leg, don't I? So I would rub his leg, and I'd rub his leg, and he'd say, oh, that's good, that's good. And they would do all his scenes. And of course, he had something wonderful and sensual to work from because I was rubbing his leg. You know, and he could be very warm and generous. And he didn't have to ask. I tried not to rub his third leg, as we say. So then we were just about to break for my lunch, and they were setting up to do my close-ups. And he said, darling, I will do the same for you when it comes to be your close-ups. I said, well, thank you. I didn't need it, but I said, thank you anyway. So I said, and I was joking. I said, Anthony, are you going to rub my leg now? I didn't care. I didn't need it. I was well trained. And he said, how dare you? How unprofessional. And he got up in front of the cast and the crew and in front of the director, which was Dick Fleischer, whose family owns Betty Boop, does not need the money. Stood up there and ranted and raved and told me off and how unprofessional I was. And I'm telling you, I guess my heart had been opened at that time because in that moment, my innocence was killed in that moment of trusting a leading man opposite me. Because I had just a wonderful experience with Gene Hackman and Lee Marvin before that, and midgets. I mean, thank God for midgets I had more face in. So I was almost in tears, and I held it back, and I got to my trailer, and I knew I was ruining my makeup, and I knew that my eyes would swell up and just look like crap on my close-up. And I couldn't stop. I was so crushed and hurt that somebody would betray me like that. Well, Dick Fleischer came to the trailer, and he was a man of very few words. And he said to me, he said, "Miss Tompkins," I said, "Yes." He said, "Do not let this man upset you." And I was crying away, and I said, "I can't stop. What do you mean? I mean, I can't, look how he treated me in front of everybody, and I didn't do anything like that with him. I didn't do anything to him." And he said, "Do not ruin your close-up. Whatever you have to do to pull yourself together, do not ruin your close-up. You can do this. Give me all that you've got, and do not let this man get to you." And I went, German, Scotch, Irish, God of all, I will not eat dirt from this man ever again. And I pulled myself together, and I went back, and you can see the results in that film of The Dawn is Dead. And he got up from the table, never said a word, and Dick Fleischer said, "You are a wonderful pro. I'm glad to have you in my film." And I gotta tell you, when you talk about a love scene, I should have had a clue before that scene. But we're on the lot at Universal Studios. Now, I'm playing the part of a singer, and he is the Mafia Don, one of the last Mafia Dons. And I am dating one of his young henchmen, which is Robert Forster, a very fine actor. But I come to him, and I offer myself and my body to the Don because I want to move up in terms of my career. And I turn around, and I have supposedly naked from the waist up, under the sheets, ready for him. Well, this is supposed to be a closed set. There's not supposed to be anybody or viewers or guests or strangers in, because this is not a time when people are doing a lot of nudity or semi-nudity. So I'm under this sheet, and they're directing, and all of a sudden Anthony Quinn walks in. And he says, "Come on in, folks. Come on in, folks." And here comes this entire crowd, which happens to be the ambassador from Spain and his wife and entourage and everybody there. And I'm just a prop. I'm saying, I'll be darned. This is exactly what the executive warned me of. I'll be darned. And he comes over, and now he's supposed to take down the sheets and begin to kiss my body. So I'm enduring all of this nonsense and disrespect. And all of a sudden, I look down, and we're going to do another scene take. And I see right here on this breast an imprint of his mustache. He had put dye on his mustache to look younger. And I kind of smiled to myself. And I said, "Oh, wow, nice. God, of the Germans and the Irish and anybody that's an underdog and treated with disrespect, thank you." And so when they go to do the next close-up, everybody's ready. I don't say anything. I just kind of keep my sheet up over it. And as he comes over and he comes to do his scene, I stop in the middle. I said, "Oh, excuse me. Anthony, what?" I said, "You left your mustache on my breast." He said, "What?" I said, "You left your print of your mustache on my breast. Is that real? Or is that dyed?" And he said, and all of a sudden, Dick Fleischer said, "Excuse me, can we have makeup here?" And he said, "Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I told you late. Oh, excuse me." There are some delicious moments in life. sometimes on camera and sometimes off.
Okay, let's go with just the last question. Let's find out what everybody's doing now, what things you are working on, what you got coming out. Let's start with Ted.
Well, I'm writing a book on coming from San Francisco to Los Angeles and writing comedy and the background on that. I wrote a screenplay in 1989 called Axine, which now is coming together as a film that they're going to produce. Aside from that, I'm doing another comedy pilot. I did pilots, by the way, with Marsha Wallace, with probably 35 people. And I've got lots of pilot stories. If you want to talk about those after this, I certainly would like to talk with you.
And Angel?
I'm writing a book, which is an autobiography called The First Clue. It seems my whole life I had a lot of first clues. And I've written and I'm producing a true story for my son and I about the kidnapping of my granddaughter, who is now turned 18 and I've never seen, to the Marshall Islands, and how we've been able to reunite that moment, which hasn't happened yet because it will happen on film. And that's kind of a difficult film to make, but through improv and through healing and with my son, who's a really fine actor, I'll be able to put it in a kind of a rough form, and then I'll pitch it to the studios to do for the big screen.
And you're also very much involved with the Screen Actors Guild.
I'm very involved with the union, not because we need more money, not because the stars are not paid enough, but because the average actor now, if you're a woman and you're over 40, there aren't roles per se, you're not being hired. And then when you do work in background, so that you can at least get your health and pension benefits each year, and it gets tougher and tougher, you need 68 days. Well, if you work as background, each one of those days work, but you need 68 of them. And if you work that contract, you're treated really worse than cattle. I've heard production assistants turn around when the actors have done their best to do atmosphere and make a show really look good behind the stars, turn to her assistant, and when he says, "Are we going to bring them back?" she says, "Nah, we'll get a better bunch tomorrow." I've heard PAs turn around, these are the production assistants, turn around and tell actors of substantial credits who are now working, trying to get their health and welfare benefits, turn around and say, "You're just props we have to feed." And the working conditions, yes, it's nice to be fed, it's nice to be paid, but they don't even provide chairs, and they hire a lot of non-union now, and they violate our contract constantly. And so every benefit that we ever get has to be worked on from the board, and those boards are elected. We do not get paid to be on those boards, and we stand there and we literally fight our own staff to negotiate for us. And right now what the staff is trying to do is take over the union, usurp the union's authority, and take away the authority of the board. And it's a battle, and we do it.
All right, Luna?
Before I tell you what I'm not doing, I really want to thank all of you for making this such a wonderful convention and being as sweet and family-like as you all are. And I see Kathy. Kathy, I see you sneaking over there. I don't see Tommy, but please help me thank them for giving us this wonderful opportunity. I'm retired. I mean, I'm just being a lazy bum. I'm traveling around and enjoying myself and finding out what it's like not to have to wait for a phone call from an agent, This is great. Thanks.
And Barbara does have a website if you want to visit, barbaraluna.com. Okay, Don?
Well, much like Miss Luna. I mean, I knew you were going to go there. I knew that. No, I'm retired. And happy as, well, I'm feeling finer than frog fur at this point. I have I'm actually busier now that I'm retired than I was the last 15 years in Hollywood. Doing these conventions, some voiceover work here and there, locally or for some other people. And plus we've got I have a dear writer friend who writes stories like Night Gallery and Twilight Zone stuff. And we have several CDs on release called Tales of Tidyvale, in which I play a gravedigger in this town of Tidyvale, and I tell the stories of how these people came to be in my graveyard. And they're kind of fun, and they're out on the eBay and so forth. And actually, suddenly I'm alive, more alive than I've ever been. That Hollywood scene, you go there and you work hard and you try and do the best you can, and the more and better you get, the less respect you seem to be. It's like, you know, these people play King of the Mountain. Once you've kind of acquired that status is up here, everybody tries to break you down, bring you down, one way or another. And I've talked to some Academy Award and other award-winning writers, producers, and directors and saying, hi, how are you? They say, hi, how are you back? I say, are you going to do some more work? And they all say, almost unequivocally, hell no, I'm out.